in the same model as the DHS Fusion Center, where intel comes in from all different areas, gets distilled, and then kind of pushed back out.
Welcome back to another installment of the Next Gen Case Study series. On today's episode, I have Jon Poteet, who is the Vice President of Marketing and Communications at Black Swan Cybersecurity, a company specializing in advanced cybersecurity solutions. With a career spanning over 2 decades, Jon brings a wealth of experience from roles in cybersecurity, risk management, and strategic communications, contributing significantly to the development and execution of cutting-edge cybersecurity strategies, which is why we're excited to have him on the show. Jon, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So I'm particularly excited to pick your brain on some of the work that you're up to right now in terms of growing Black Swan. It looks like you guys have achieved some significant success, since your time being there. Before we jump into all of that, though, I'd love to get a quick little background on who you are, where you came from, and how you landed as the Vice President of Marketing and Communications at Black Swan.
Sure. Originally, I'm from West Texas. Black Swan is headquartered in Dallas, which is north central Texas. But I'm originally from West Texas and didn't have a whole ton of exposure to the corporate world. I grew up kind of rural. I'm a military brat, so I joined the Marine Corps right out of high school. I knew that if I went to college, I was going to waste my parents' money. So I was like, let's just get some service out of the way, and maybe it'll help me see things a little straighter. And it certainly did. And it made college a lot easier, right? So while I was in college, I didn't know particularly what avenue I wanted to go down. It was the mid 90s, and the internet just kind of blew up. So obviously that was attractive, and I figured out, okay, I'm a writer, and it just so happened that technical communication was the major for web developers, and it happened to be an English major where I was going to school. It just kind of aligned. I got into that, built my first website in 96, and did an internship with Compaq Computers back when they existed, one summer in 99, and then went straight from there into doing tech comm for semiconductor industry in Dallas. And in that, there's few different routes you can go down. Some can be extremely technical, and others a little more marketing communications related. And I've got a creativity side, but also a technical side. So it just kind of gelled into web development and kind of some of the more tactical aspects of the Marcom role.
So marketing is kind of the backbone to the whole thing, and you just have been exploring kind of different spaces to apply that skill that you've developed.
Yeah. So that's one way to look at it is I entered into marketing in the marketing department and all that through a large public company, and stayed with public companies for about 15 years. So I got to see a very mature way to do Marcom B2B. And I also got to see a lot of fleecing because they spent a lot of money, those public companies. And I saw a lot of waste, and also saw whenever there was a hiccup, like say 2007, 2008, marketing's first to go. So I just kind of how, I guess water seeks its own level. And I just kind of flowed to where revenue generation was. And they're not going to get rid of those high performing salespeople, and those high performing salespeople need, sales support. So some people went to bat for me, and early on, I'd say my first 3 months of working, they let go of the whole department, and it was just me left. So that was my first taste of corporate America. It was, wow, they can make pretty heavy cuts pretty quickly. But I think that all that's benefited me in moving into the startup industry, because I've done every aspect, and there's probably ballparking it 30 different things you can do in Marcom, and I've done them all, and I could see which ones you can have a fast ROI on, and which ones have a low minimum investment dollar wise, but are massive resource constraints. So I could kind of see what are our resources and where can I maximize our efficiencies, to grow.
Right. I imagine that over that time of initially that idea of like, here, throw you in the deep end of the lake and hope that you can swim, but then also figuring out that you do kind of have some legs and you do kind of know a little bit about what you're doing and you can actually achieve the results that you set out to achieve. I mean, that's probably why you stayed in the space so long. I wonder if you could maybe share how your role has kind of evolved as the landscape of marketing has changed over the last, decade or so.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if we were to hop in a time machine and go back 15 years, I think that there was a lot more trickery going on. There's a lot more
Mm,
gaming, there, keyword loading, and I think that you can game the system a lot better. Um, the digital, everything's pretty much gone digital,
mm,
and back then there was some hard copy stuff. You'd have print costs and stuff like that. Those kind of dwindle, and that money has been put into digital. And I've seen a ton of digital fleecing going on with companies trying to grow. I mean, they want to throw money at marketing. They want to improve their I guess their pool that they play in, uh, and continue to grow that. And there's different ways to do that. If you don't have much, you can in the way of content, you can pay your Google AdWords, and you can pay for LinkedIn boosts and different things like that on different platforms. And so while there is something to that, as soon as you stop paying that stuff, it goes away.
mm,
And all of your results and all your traffic that you generated just disappears. So, whenever, fortunately, when I moved into my third public company where I stayed the longest, which was a semiconductor company, my supervisor was one of the longest tenured employees there, and he basically treated it as his own company, even though it was public. He'd been working there for 30 years, and so first day I was like, all right, well, I've got this big department. I've got people in Shanghai and in Taiwan and UK and in Silicon Valley. What's my budget? And he said, I don't really like that term. I don't like that. Um, the word budget. Let's just keep it cheap. And I was very shocking to me, especially in a public company. But he he there was a method to his madness, and by
mm,
doing that, I did keep it cheap. I mean, I had a decent signing authority, but for big projects, it's kind of like going to your dad or like Santa Claus, and you're like, here's this thing, and making a business case for it, and then he'll approve it or he won't, or he'll ask for more information, or that's where I learned to get, no matter what, always get like 3 quotes at the bare minimum, things like that. But what ended up coming out of that was keeping it cheap, and we did that primarily through real, technical, organic content. We can't fake. You can't fake real content, and people can read through. People are savvy, and they can read through marketing fluff now. Nobody wants to be sold to. People want to learn. People want to be educated. You just got a more educated consumer now, even with B2B. So what I saw when I came on board with Black Swan is an opportunity, and that is, this is a company that's doing it for real. There's an in-house SOC, security operations center, which is the kind of the room you think about with all the computers and the monitors up on the wall. The guy where the white hat hacker guys,
yeah.
the cybersecurity engineers are working. That's a huge expense, operational expense, and most. I don't want to say most, but many of the cybersecurity companies that I've come across, especially smaller ones, outsource that. Well, Black Swan had it in house, and I've known Dr. Saylor, our CEO, for years, and worked with him at Cyber Defense Labs, where we also had an in-house SOC, and that the benefit to that is you have your top down, uh, basically your whole. I don't want to call it a supply chain, but you can play with your what you're going to charge who. And where that plays with our market is that we serve a lot of underserved communities, K through 12 school districts, municipalities, water purification, critical infrastructure, where there's not, it's not like working with Toyota, where there's just endless money. And so what we do is, let's say we have some large clients, which we start that we would charge the like industry rate, and then we can kind of help out some of the clients that they wouldn't normally be able to afford the type of cybersecurity that they need. Important stuff, especially in schools with all the PII, different types of data that they can get from our children. And you got school systems like Fort Worth ISD, which have 95,000 endpoints. And that's a very large footprint to have any type of faulty cybersecurity. So that's kind of one of the differentiators for Black Swan, is that there's a large service aspect to our whole value prop.
So when it comes to the organic content route, there, at least in my experience, there's this unreasonable lag time between the point of discovery, like when somebody who needs you finds that content, to when they actually decide, like, oh, actually, we should go and pursue this intentionally and implement something, and we've chosen to go with Black Swan. Have you found that to be true for the work that you do as well? And if so, what are you doing to kind of compensate for that, or to offset that kind of lag time or delay between discovery to deal?
Yeah, for sure. I found that absolutely to be true, that there's a very long lead time or cycle time or whatever term you want to use. But from the time that, let's say we push out some content, and the content that I'm talking about specifically is technical in nature. It's not, we're not asking them, hey, check with us, see if we can, be a better fit. We have some of that. But what I'm talking about is strictly threat reports. Like this is what we've seen. This is an indicator of compromise that you can put into your environment. You can give to your IT security people, and something to watch out for. And that is what I've seen as far as analytics and metrics go, seem to be the highest drivers of website traffic, is to those technical threat reports. From the time that they read those, who knows by the time they contact us. But what normally happens, and this is just kind of anecdotal, but we could drum up some analytics to support this, is that it builds this degree of trust, where if they see our logo name, they know, hey, there's probably going to be some code in here that I should look for. It's not just fluff. It's not just cool pictures of something that's in, I don't want to say advertorial, but because we're all in this everybody's trying to make a living, but they're not ads. They are actionable threat reports, and they'll build up that reputation of just being a trusted advisor, even when we're not contracted with you. That's built some goodwill in the community, especially in the DFW area, where we have a pretty strong presence. And, our CEO is out speaking quite a bit. He's a circuit speaker and a thought leader and a professor, and has been doing this as long as it's been an industry. So people listen. When Dr. Saylor speaks up, and, when Black Swan shows up to something, they know we're not there to wow them and just kind of grease their hands and that kind of thing. So, but I think that one thing I might want to touch on is the necessity of that technical content. It was born out of, stated it wrong. It was born out of necessity, because when I came on board, it's like, hey, we're trying to do all this stuff, but we're still in startup mode, and we don't want to take a ton of outside investment because then they can start moving things around, and they might see, hey, here's this public education space. The margins aren't very good on that. Why are y'all in that space? And it's more about the mission and the integrity of what we're doing than it is that margin, because those margins in every other sector are probably just fine, and how greedy do you need to be? I'm probably not doing a very good job for future IPO, but that's not really my position. We have a value system in place. We have ethics, and these are the most scrupulous and trustworthy people I've ever worked with. That's why I'm here.
I get a sense, John, that the reputation of being a company that is actually doing something to combat what is obviously a big challenge for our entire society is really important to maintain that reputation and build that brand. And then unfortunately, from a marketing perspective, building brand and reputation isn't necessarily measurable. It isn't something that you can say that I spent this many dollars and cents and I have achieved this level of an ROI. And so but how much can you attribute people's decision making to trusting that the brand is who they say they are based on the way that they interact with their communities. And so it's a noble venture to be the company, or to want to be the company that stands out for that reason. But also it's a challenge. I wonder, when it comes to kind of dealing with this sort of thing, what what's your approach to it? Do you collaborate externally? Do you find, tools and knowledge and information from third parties, or is this something that you kind of work on internally with your own teams to, develop your strategies?
No, it's a good question. It's definitely, I haven't ventured outside of the company, just due to trying to keep things pretty tight. And outside of the company, it seems like whenever I reached out, again, spending 15 years in public companies that have the money to burn, I've seen a lot of fleecing, and I can kind of start reading through empty promises, or maybe they're not empty promises, but they're giving me best case scenarios. And so I think that I now have the kind of questions, not to poke holes in what they're trying to do, but to ask the right questions and say, okay, well, in our situation, this variable is not X, it's Y. And so how would that look like? How effective would this be if you didn't have this element, this big investment? Let's say it's HubSpot. I'm just throwing something out there. It's a big investment. And if you don't have HubSpot, and this company is basically a HubSpot collaborator with APIs and stuff like that, it's not going to be a good fit, because they're going to say, oh, well, we can offer you maybe this discounted HubSpot. But it's like, I didn't even want to get into that. That seems to be, when I reach out for help, there seems to be an agenda to move their product, which I totally get. But if it's not a good fit, it's not something that I'm necessarily got to be wowed by a dinner or an event or something that I'm invited to. Unfortunately, I think that there are some people, decision makers in the C-suite, not here, but at other companies, like CIOs, CISOs, who may not be talking to, or may not have a two-way conversation with the guys in the trenches that are using the products, because that's what we've come across a lot, is that there's been an investment made for security, but they never consulted. And I'm going to use this as a term of endearment because I am one. They never consulted the grunts, the guys doing the work. And I was a full-on grunt, infantry all the way. So it's not to me, it's a term of endearment, because they're the ones that are doing the work. And to me, if you're in that type of position, it would behoove you to probably check with, hey, is this the right tool for the job? Is this what you think you guys need? Or, you tell me, because they're the ones, the CISOs, CIOs, they're the ones that are being invited to different events and being allowed and taken on trips and, uh, under, educational purposes. Um, and they get sold a bill of goods sometimes. It's not necessarily disingenuous, but it may not be the right fit for the guys that are actually going to be using it, and not just reporting it. They may be wowed by the dashboard and be like, "Oh, that'd be cool to show our our board," but the tool itself may not be up to par. And that's one thing where at Black Swan we like to say we're technology agnostic in that we have multiple different environments, especially larger cybersecurity vendors that we have uh, relationships with, and we can partition out. So if you are already using a particular technology, we're not going to ask you, hey, can you switch over to our platform? Because we don't have a proprietary platform. Like our value is in our SOC, which is really more of a fusion center. It's in the same model as the DHS fusion center, where intel comes in from all different areas, gets distilled, and then kind of pushed back out. And that's what we do.
Yeah, I relate to that challenge of to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And what's worse is I relate more to the guys on the tools um, from this perspective of yeah, you can use a hammer to hammer in a screw or a bolt, but is that's not necessarily the best way to achieve that outcome. And so if the hammer comes around saying, "Hey, listen, we get it done," it's like kind of a dilemma that you create in like, well, yeah, but no, it's not the way that it should be done, and we need to drill a hole and put a bolt in instead of hammering this thing through the wood because it's going to create more problems than it solves. So I do completely relate to that. So when it comes to, implementing some of these tools and technologies, you mentioned that you're tech agnostic in that you are open to, using all kinds of things. Um, is that more for your clients, or is that more kind of your general approach to just the way of doing business?
I think that I think it wasn't intentionally mapped out like in 2011. I don't think that Mike Saylor and the guys that started Cyber Defense Labs with sat down and said, let's be technology agnostic. I think that they saw a need, and I'm speculating now because he's not here to speak on it, but I've been around him long enough. But I think they saw a need that there should be a managed security services provider that doesn't try to push a product, that can work with your environment, because that's a huge capital. Again, it's a big investment. If you sign on for, I don't know, a secure Onyx platform and you sign a 3-year deal with them, that's a major investment. And while the whoever may be running that may not be that effective, you're pretty emboldened to that
Mm,
product.
mhm.
So whoever's going to come along and maybe take that over, they need to understand that as well. So we recently had a client who was operating in an environment that we'd never used before, and so before we took them on, we uh, scoped it and talked to everybody, talked to the SOC manager and everybody, and they're like, okay, yeah, we wanted to learn this, so let's get up to speed on it, and did that in order to facilitate bringing on this new client, because otherwise they would have had, and they had the money to switch platforms, but we were like, you know what, we don't think you're going to need to do that, because this will just expand our capabilities to another major platform. So I think it just kind of it organically became part of the culture.
Yeah, I see how just being flexible enough to work with the clients in the best interest of the client, I see how that has served you in terms of the success that you guys have achieved. So, if there was when it comes to like the whole marketing ecosystem, if there was, one thing that you absolutely despise about the whole situation, what would you change about it? If you could wave a magic wand and all that problem goes away, what would it be?
I don't know. I wish you would have sent me this question earlier, because I'd have a laundry list for you. But Now, pain points like looking over at my list here, the pain points are. Uh, I don't think people realize the amount of time, resources, energy goes into just building a new section on a website because there's content. Like, where's this content coming from? It's like, okay, great, we want to do this, but let's get some input here, and so it then is incumbent upon me and it kind of put on my project manager hat and say, okay, well, I need you to provide this amount of content in this space that answers these questions by this date, kind of, basically ramrod this stuff. But then there's the whole coding side, which even opening up a page to edit it sometimes takes like a minute, so
Right.
there's that. And that's one aspect. I think that the web development side of Marcom I've done this a million different ways. I do think it should be its own role,
Mm,
and not something that lives in IT. It should still live in Marcom. But a lot of times, especially now that everybody's pretty savvy, everybody's built a website or two. That it's like, oh well, you're familiar with WordPress. Let's do this. I think that if you really want to make uh, movement in this stuff and be timely, especially with like, hey, there's a new hack, something happened to Sony, and let's get stuff out there. If web development is an afterthought, then the other things that people are working on fall off. And so, hey, we got to focus on web development. So that's one aspect. I think the other one is the uh, the platforms. So, like all the different social media platforms, it's table stakes now. Unfortunately, they don't all have the same kind of language or protocol when it comes to tagging and the stuff that really makes social work, the cross pollination.
right.
And you push something out through, I'll just take a platform like Zoho through their social media, platform. And it'll post to, your Facebook and X and LinkedIn and all that. But it loses the formatting and tagging and all the stuff that really makes it work. So it's almost like not a time save. It's better just to just do them individually because then you can get it right. And that's a massive. I think that's a place that could be shored up pretty quickly. It seems like to me, and maybe I'm not using the right platform to manage all the social media, but I just have found it easier to do, individually because you're also limited by character count. LinkedIn, you may want to have one long form. Twitter or X is something else. So I think those are two big ones. Would be social media and web. Maybe kind of those are off on their own part of the farm.
Yeah, we just need a different department for that whole subsection of activities. I know when it comes to the social media stuff, trying to figure out which of those platforms to use to like schedule it out. And then what's worse is you get penalized for trying to be efficient because the platform now is going to throttle the content because it wasn't natively posted or yeah, and there's all these like convoluted little details in the whole system that just makes it even more cumbersome. So I can definitely appreciate that one for sure.
That algorithm of oh well, it didn't originate here. It was just kind of pushed through here, and so we're not going to give it the same reach. It's just it is pretty convoluted. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that could be straightened out.
Yeah, this social media platforms all battling each other. And it's the thing that I think annoyed me the most was when they started implementing this whole like, are you sure you want to leave the platform? You just clicked on a link. And it's like, what are you doing here? I know I clicked on it. My thumb did it from my brain to my thumb. It's not a very long pathway. I don't think I forgot that I just clicked on this thing. Why are you scaring me away from it? And it's bad too, because people who aren't technologically savvy don't really understand it. And so they really do think that it's fear, and then it kills your numbers. And okay, if you're not paying the platform, then you're not going to get that off platform visit. And so yeah, that's a tough battle, the whole social media arena. I can totally relate to that. John, we're kind of coming to the end of our time together here, and you've been very generous with your wisdom and insight, and I've learned a lot here so far. If we could to kind of close things off here on a high note, I wonder, what are you aiming at with Black Swan? What are some of the big goals coming down the pipeline on the horizon for you?
So one of the things that I wanted to do since day one is I want to get Dr. Saylor out there, like in front of more people, because he's a natural educator, speaker, lecturer. He's a fun guy. He's not your normal egghead, like cyber guy. He did, play football in college and like fight in the octagon. He's kind of a unique character, but he's got a great way of relaying information to people that
Mm,
they understand it. They trust it. He doesn't over talk them and he doesn't talk down to them. I think that comes from being a professor. And I think that with the growth that we've had organically, I've now carved out maybe a little bit of space that, hey, let's make some investments. And with the organic growth, it's like we don't need our footprint to grow so much as far as pushing things out and getting, mic in front of cameras more.
mm.
And so that's really kind of what we're working on now. And he'll be speaking. I mean, he's speaking several times in the next few months, but I'd like to get him more in front of camera and in front of people. You're not your CIOs, but your practitioners.
The right guy, yeah, to guruify him.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And maybe I'd like to maybe turn him away from forensics, which is that's it's an important thing, but it's a time occupier, just like web development. Like when we get into forensics, it's like everything we drop everything. We're just like trying to crack this phone, and um, yeah, I think that expanding a little more investment into uh, growing out the company a little bit to ease up some of like I'm better maybe in the strategy role and conveying, hey, this information to this type of user or uh, industry, and same thing having Dr. Saylor uh, focus on pushing the message out, getting the message out. Because it is
Yeah.
a different company. It is a unique company for sure.
Yeah, you guys definitely stand out. The work that you're doing around that reputation building and serving the community is super valuable, and um, the necessity for that higher level brand to get Dr. Saylor out there to get people to understand, the value of all of this stuff is really important too. And so you got your work cut out for you, John. That's for sure.
Yeah, yeah. It's
As
it's
we
not a shortage of things to do.
Yeah, definitely. As we wrap things up here, John, I wonder if there was a piece of advice that you could offer somebody in a similar role who's up to similar things, facing the same challenges. What would that piece of advice be?
Okay, I would look at what are you trying to do? What's like the big goal? And then what are you creating organically internally within the company that you can leverage as content? And and that's where these threat reports came out. I saw these guys doing this great work, and I'm like, nobody's seeing this. And if it's not classified, we have classification levels. If it's a clear classification level, let's get it out there, and we just put our logo on it, and that's in a URL, and that's and that's it. And I think that, and I did the same thing in semiconductors. There are a lot of application notes and things like that that people were writing for specifically Apple for the iPhone that use the chip this way. Well, that's not just Apple, that's any mobile device that needs that, power management chip. And so let's start pushing that stuff out there. I think that just understanding what you're trying to do and then finding the stuff is being built somewhere in the company and learning how to corral that in, repurpose it, and present it to the potential client.
Yeah, that's really sound advice. I know in the changing landscape of marketing, being able to bring content that's actually valuable to the people that you're trying to serve to prove that you have the authority and the information and the knowledge to execute, super, super valuable. John, yeah, yeah, you need evidence now. You need to come with receipts. This has been great, John. Thank you so much for joining me here. If somebody wanted to reach out to you to pick your brain or perhaps work with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I mean, you can contact me through LinkedIn or directly on my email at jdpoteet@gmail.com.
Perfect. We'll make sure to link to all that stuff in the show notes. And for the rest of you who are watching and listening, if you want to get in touch with me and my team for any of your marketing needs, by all means, visit nextgengrowth.com. Otherwise, that's it for this episode. Thanks for joining us, and I will see you in the next.